I'm thinking a lot back in 1978. Is there a second instinctual issue that really triggers all these kind of nutty adaptations that my wife and I were seeing in therapy and that I had seen in my years as a minister? And so I was asking myself, and my wife and I were seeing probably 100 people a week because we did 13 group therapies of 8 apiece, and then we saw individuals and we saw couples. So we're seeing a vast amount of people per week. And so I began to ask, is abandonment an issue in the problems of each person? Did it trigger that problem? And I kept finding over and over and over again that abandonment was an issue. It's very clear in terms of infants, people who from birth to age 2, who do not have much consciousness yet, who are not thinking people. Their very lives depend on adjusting, adapting to whatever situation they're in. For instance, I mentioned Joan earlier, the woman who I said felt concave, who talked about having holes in her, that she was empty, that she was hollow. And so I sent her back to see her Aunt Ellen, who talked to her about her mother's postpartum depression. Now Joan, in a sense, had to accept black milk. She did not have true nurture. And so what she had done was had become a very dependent personality, a person who felt empty inside. And as I said, it took several years to work with Joan to get her to feel normal, sad, angry, scared, happy, excited, tender feeling. So Joan had an issue of abandonment. All kids below age 2 who make some major adaptation have an issue of abandonment. But as I was working with my wife and seeing these many people per week, over and over and over in situation after situation, I was seeing some issue about abandonment. Take Ed. I mentioned Ed, the man that worked at an advertising agency and who would, like the Christ, take on somebody else's problems in his own body. His wife, his mother, some lady at a basketball game. And so I would ask to myself, now how did abandonment cause this weird adaptation? And he had explained it. His mother had real deep depression when he was 4 years of age, and he worried about whether or not she would survive. Would she go to a mental hospital? Would she commit suicide? What would happen? And so I went person to person. Mary, here she was, Mama's little helper in terms of birth order. And what had happened to her when she was a young girl, another baby had come along and Mother said, I want you to be Mommy's little helper. And so she had given up her childhood natural emotions, and that was her adaptation. She had lost. She had been abandoned in terms of the nurture that she received from her mother. Now, I went through client after client after client in my mind because I wanted to understand, was there a second instinctual fear? One thing that I realized is that the strongest person in a duet, a marriage or whatever, there's one person that holds the ace of spades, the top card in the deck. That person has the abandonment card. And I did a lot of thinking, as did my wife. And by the way, when I say I so frequently, it would be tough to just say we. You wouldn't know who I was referring to. But she was my equal partner in terms of observation as we were understanding abandonment. Now, once we understood it, for instance, we would find out who has the abandonment card. That's the most powerful person in a relationship, whether it's a boss at work. What if the boss at work takes away his authority and just starts saying, well, whatever you want, men, working in a factory, whatever you want, women working in a factory. By taking away the abandonment card, where he can fire them and be a little tough, he has lost some production. And he begins to have more rebellions among the ranks. What happens when a parent gives the abandonment card to a child? I mentioned that earlier. The kid begins to think he's real tough, strong, it could be a girl, and that he controls. And he's too young to do this. So I would tell parents, my wife would tell parents, you have to take back the abandonment card. I'm going to say more about this, but I think this is an introduction to the main fear that really promotes a lot of adaptation. And not only in America, all over the world in terms of religious adaptation, political adaptations, terrorist adaptations, whatever, the main trigger is the fear of abandonment. People want to belong and they give up their individuality.